At Bedrosian, we aim to align the goals of academics and practitioners, to make clear what good government looks like, to work to foster effective governance and spread good ideas, and ultimately, to work to make sure that government implements good policy.
The wealth held by the top 10th of 1% is about the same as the wealth held in the United States by the bottom 90% of the population. It might not make sense that we leave out of this determination of wealth an additional pool of wealth that might be held by organizations that are controlled by the individuals who are in the top 10th of 1%. These are organizations that control an enormous amount of wealth and are spending only a relatively small fraction of it each year. Why are they spending only a small fraction of their assets? By and large, it's because there are legal rules that govern the organization that prevent the money from being spent faster. The managers of the organization have to manage the money and spend it out in such a way to try to ensure that the money will last forever. A lot of foundations have a similar rule of thumb where if they have a perpetual gift, they're not spending more than 5 to 6% of the net assets. There are legal rules that encourage this set of behaviors, the giving of gifts subject to restrictions and the maintaining them in perpetuity. So the government, in essence, is pushing organizations towards a particular way of managing their money, managing it in perpetuity and parceling it out in small pieces. The other big tax incentive that's at work here is the fact that once the assets are inside the private foundation, investment returns are no longer subject to taxation. The reason that it encourages restricted spending is essentially what it means is the longer the money sits in the organization's hands, the bigger the government subsidy is. I think that the optimal level of spending is higher than the level that the government is currently encouraging. When you don't spend money now, that means that there are projects that you could have invested in that would have had returns. Now, for sure, when you're investing the money, that means that over time you'll have more money to spend. That's not even counting what I call the indirect costs. These are the lost opportunities to learn and experiment. So if you're not funding projects, you don't have an opportunity to learn how to do the next project better. There aren't good reasons to think that the government's policy should be to encourage slower spending. The tax code says that if you're this organization that calls a private foundation, you have to spend at least 5% of your net investment asset, essentially within a year. I think that you could set a payout rate that is much higher than 5% and not worry about the foundation sector getting any smaller than its current real size. What we should be concerned about from a governance perspective, from a policy perspective, is the sector as a whole and not any one foundation. It's not clear to me what good these caps are doing currently. Technically, a donor-advised fund is just an account that is held on behalf of some donor. If you're a little convinced at least that payout rates are potentially appropriate, the fact that donor advised funds aren't subject to any payout requirement at all is something that I think is worth thinking about.
Implementing good policy. That's the way we move forward together and prosper. We're all in this together.